Live, and this is Amanda LOS. You are tuned into Inalienable Sovereignty, Conversations for Elevation, and I am super excited for our juicy guest today, Veronica Monet.
Hi, Amanda. I'm so glad to be here
Yay, good to have you here. And you've been in my life in and out, no pun
for a
intended,
while now.
for a while.
Yeah.
And so appreciate our connection and really excited to drop in and learn a little bit more about you and what you do and how inalienable sovereignty applies to you. But I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself to the people that do not know you like I do.
Okay, cool. So I am a certified sexologist and an anger management specialist. I'm also an internal family systems, that's IFS, not to be confused with family constellations, informed coach. And I predominantly work with couples. And I take on some pretty gnarly topics, including domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse. But the vast majority of the people that I work with actually are looking to have better communication skills, stop arguing, learn how to handle their anger in ways that are not destructive. So
Beautiful.
I've got extreme outliers, and then there's just, the vast majority of people who are just having really typical issues that tamp down their sexual joy. And that's kind of the door through which they find me. They're like, help us with our sex life. And I go, okay, so let's talk about how you fight. And they're like, well, we don't. I go, well, that's a problem. And or they say, oh, well, yeah, but then we say we're sorry and it's fine. I'm like, well, do you keep having the same argument over and over again? Oh, sure, of course we do. Well, let's fix that. Let's solve it.
Right. Nice.
And I have a big container for a lot of different types of sexuality. At the same time, I'm really committed to rebirthing the divine feminine. And part of that to me is reconnecting with our sacred sexuality. So for people who don't want to know about sacred sexuality, I'm not going to, teach them about it, but a lot of people do.
Yeah.
And want to know what it's about. And everybody's looking for that more fulfilling, ascended, unified experience,
Oh.
and more embodied. And I like to say that it's a very interesting thing about sacred sex, because we use the body to escape it.
Mm.
So if you really get to that point where you've merged with the divine and with your beloved, there's a way in which you're actually having an out-of-body experience, which is unlike doing psychedelics.
No doubt. No
Yeah.
doubt. I've had both of those experiences and they're quite lovely. And I just want to, some people might not know what a sexologist is unless you even, you can just break it down, somebody who studies sex. But I know that I misunderstood you briefly. So maybe you could share a little bit about
Yes. Well,
what that is.
it's easy for people to get confused because I have a background as a high-end escort. And so people think, oh, you became a sexological body worker. No, I didn't. Lots and lots of props to that field.
Yeah.
I actually know the man who founded it, Joseph Kramer. I was sitting right next to him when he came up with the idea in San Francisco. I was astounded. Really going to teach people how to touch people sexually and get paid for it? And they're going to get certified in the state of California. Well, now there's certifications all over around the world.
Amazing.
But that's not what I do. I stopped touching people's bodies in 2004. And believe me, I brought sacred prostitution and sacred sexuality to my journey as an escort. Mm-hmm. And I'm still very passionate about sex worker rights. And recently was in San Francisco. It's when Scott Wiener introduced legislation that actually makes it possible for sex workers to report their own rapes and sexual assaults, if you can believe that we're still trying to do that. Yeah. So that's still very much a part of who I am, but no, I don't touch people now. So yeah. Except I give hugs.
Yeah, right. Hugs are so important.
Yeah. So sexologist is, I've got a certification, but really what counts the most is that vast experience around sexuality. as well as the education, so that I don't just generalize from my own personal experiences, but my own personal experiences encompass all races and socioeconomic categories over the course of 15, 17 years.
Mhm.
So that's really valuable. Who
Yeah, it
wants to
is.
learn from somebody who just read a book?
Well, that's a little bit of red flag.
Yeah.
Um, and I love that we're diving into this topic because the United States, very puritanical roots, and I know that uh, there are things that have seemed perfectly natural to talk about for me, even though I was raised from super, super puritanical roots. But why, maybe you could share a little bit with people that have, they're curious, they're maybe open-minded, but they may have had an upbringing and a culture that has tabooed sex.
Yeah.
Why is it so important to understand and enjoy sexuality in general, healthy sexuality, and in particular sacred sexuality?
Great question. By the way, I was born into a right-wing doomsday Christian religious cult. So I I know a lot about me. I've read the Bible from cover to cover when I was 12. I kept hoping to have some kind of a spiritual awakening, and it never came. I just got revolted by the dogma that was being shoved down my throat. And eventually I left the church when I was 19. Um, I became very rebellious against the sexual proscriptions being that's something that's prohibited.
Yeah.
And that's where I first started getting all my experience. I became very, very experienced sexually, but in a really frustrating, unfulfilling way. So I experienced a lot of what I think a lot of cisgender women do, of date rapes and anorgasmia, and just, like, why I'm doing this to feel loved, but there's not much else in it for me. And I really had quite a journey of this. I'm an incest survivor and also a 3-time rape survivor. So it's just way in having to reclaim my body and my pleasure. The way I look at spirituality and sexuality is that they're intertwined. I don't see a lot of difference. If I'm meditating to raise my kundalini in order to be able to channel and absorb and hear divine wisdom, it's a very similar process to when I'm raising my kundalini and making love with my beloved. There's still this way in which I'm surrendering to the divine. If you treat sex as a mechanical thing, and unfortunately in Western culture, we've got a lot of focus away from the energetic and towards the mechanical.
Technique.
Yes. And most sexologists teach technique. Look, I got technique out of the butt here. Anything you want to know, I can tell you things your doctor has no clue about. But that's not really where the action's at. Actions is really in your chakras and your kundalini energy, which is at the base of your spine, and also in this merging with the divine, which is really about surrendering. And at the same time, ironically enough, you will achieve some sovereignty. So one of the things that Western culture does to animals in order to subdue them and domesticate them is they castrate them. They get rid of their sexuality. And in a lot of ways, I believe that monotheism, which is, the big three, Judaism and Christianity and Islam, all have very, very strict ideas around sexuality, and particularly women's sexuality.
Oh, yeah.
And, we're seeing such a huge backlash right now to women's freedoms in the United States. But there's some of that taking place around the world, and some of it never really left. I was just listening to some really depressing podcasts about what's happening in Afghanistan with the women there, and it just makes my heart just scream and cry. I think it's so important for us to realize that our sexuality is our connection to the divine, and it's also our connection to our sovereignty. you take that away, somebody starts controlling that, shaming you for that, you become kind of half a person,
Yeah.
and you lose so much access to your intuition and your personal power and your personal knowing. So I think it's crucial. It's crucial that we have bodily autonomy. It's
Yeah.
also crucial that we have sexual sovereignty. And those should be absolutely positively sacred.
Hmm.
If
Beautiful.
we go back before monotheism, of course, we're going to find that there were peaceful agrarian cultures that practiced sacred sexuality.
Yeah.
That ancients knew that sex was a doorway to the divine. If you go to those ancient temples in India, there's sex all over the walls. There is no separation.
Yeah.
But if we take the sex away from people, we also take their ability to connect with the divine on their own. And we start setting ourselves up as a power structure over them. And I'm just so totally against that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you touched on so much in what you just shared, and a couple of things come to mind. I just barely finished listening on Audible to The Alphabet versus the Goddess, and then also the Immortality Key and the ties uh, between women being empowered. Historically, there's been scientific findings that's been corroborated over and over again, shared in both of these texts, that women they had sexual, their sexual power was honored, and it was a sacred thing, and it was a power, and it was a mystical power, and they helped do a lot of initiations, right? They guided the initiations for the masculine to connect with source, and they were the keepers and makers and servers of the sacred psychedelics. They found that the original Eucharist was kykeon, which has ergot in it, which is an LSD like psychedelic. So these things that helped connect us with source, our sexuality, altered consciousness,
Yeah.
these were all being practiced. And then something happened. There's a lot of different theories, which I won't go into, but then all of a sudden that changed, and women were demonized, their sexuality was cut off, demonized, altered states were demonized, sex, drugs, rock and roll, music, and imagery
Yes.
demonized, these self-expressions, and and the first texts about insanity, like talking about people going mad, started coming after that. So there's this disconnection from source, this illegality of the individual connecting with spirit on their own and needing an intercessor of a
Yeah.
church to come in and put the kibosh on all these ecstasies, these ways of going beyond ourselves. And this growing insanity, mental illness, addiction, depression, anxiety, and we know it's been getting worse and worse.
Yes.
It's like it's coincidental, but also and not.
No. No, I don't think it's coincidental at all. I mean, you know what, the Western culture and I don't know if I would even limit it to Western culture. The dominant paradigm on this planet right now is one about power and resource. And it's not about community, and it's not about sharing and uplifting and helping each other. And we don't actually have to just look to humans to find this contrast, because we've got two of our closest primate relatives on this planet that we can look at, and they have two very, very different systems. There's the bonobos and the chimpanzees. And the chimpanzees have all the afflictions that we have. They have infanticide, rape, domestic violence, murder, and war. Jane Goodall documented a 4-year war that was just so brutal. And it
Yeah.
was tribalism. It was brother against brother. They polarized and they fought each other over resources. And one of the resources that chimpanzees fight over is sex.
Yeah.
So then you look at the bonobos, and the bonobos are the peaceful agrarian cultures. They're a reflection of what human history also contains elements of.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, so just to summarize about the bonobos, one of the things I love to say, it's factually true, but most people don't word it this way, is that they are governed by a council of lesbian grandmothers.
Mm.
So, and they're actually bisexual, but they are older females and they engage in sex with each other. That's what creates a really tight bond and camaraderie within their tribe. But the males enjoy unlimited sex, and there is no rape, murder, infanticide, domestic violence, or war in bonobo land. And Frans de Waal is a leading primatologist who studied both chimpanzees and bonobos. And I've interviewed him, have a lot of respect for him, read quite a few of his books. I love one of the things that he says, which is that we have this sense that somehow or another our innate nature is deficient, and we need to have the moral overlay of religion to make sure that we don't do terrible things.
Mm.
But the truth is, we find altruism and morality in the animal kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
But it just depends on how it's organized. If it's really organized towards a lack and this grasping for power and resources, then you're probably going to see violence. But if there is an attitude of sharing, and the bonobos share everything, they share food, they share sex, they share a lot of affection. It's just, to me, that's a much more preferable system.
Yeah.
So, and it's within our reach, but we'd have to change the way that we think, and we'd have to be more concerned about the welfare of everybody instead of just ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's been so, survival has been so woven into obeying the laws of the oppressor. So, it's epigenetic, it's generational, it's, if you're one of us or you're one of them, like it's traditional. It's like it's just it's woven into our cellular memory of how it is. And it can be really hard to break out of that. For some people, oddly enough, I grew up Mormon. I grew up very, very repressed sexually, definitely. It was demonized, and I didn't feel any sense of empowerment over my body. Had a lot of physical and emotional and mental symptoms at the time, but as it was like the moment I realized, like, oh, I'm not Mormon, this isn't my thing. I have my own connection that is independent. It's not reliant on this religious structure. I let go of all of that sexual repression and shame, and I don't know how. I just lucky, or my astrology or whatever, but it's been a beautiful experience in my life, and the sacred came in as a part of that, to and was very obvious, having these altered states from deep connection. But I know that it's so woven in generationally, and I'm curious how you support people in unraveling that. And also, how do people, like, why do they come to you? Like, if they've got all this shame, right? Like, how would they take the leap to
Wow.
to to even know that that's a possibility? Maybe that's too big of a question to
No,
put on
no,
your
no,
shoulders,
no,
but
it's not too big of a question. I actually have an answer for that. Of course, everybody's individual, and various people come for various different reasons. But I think the fact that I am a former sex worker who's out and unapologetic about that is helpful, because
yeah.
people feel like well, I can tell her anything. Now, that was actually the truth when I was working as an escort. Men told me all kinds of stuff that they would have never told, their lawyers, brokers, wives, children, therapists. So I'm used to receiving a lot of heavy truths that
Yeah.
people are terrified of having discovered. And I'm really good at keeping secrets. So having a track record of that and, a history of that, I think is comforting to people. I think also some of them may feel superior to me at times, if they do, that's unfortunate for them, but it might give them a sense of safety to go ahead and take that leap. And once they find out who I am, and they're actually sitting across from me, whether on video or in my office, they have an experience of somebody who really is able to walk or talk. I don't just say, oh yeah, well, whatever you've been through, I can handle it. I can actually be grounded and present for them.
Yeah.
And that comes from years of experience. It also comes from the fact that I've lived through so much.
Yeah.
So, and I also make no secret of the fact that I'm not just a domestic violence survivor. I'm a domestic violence perpetrator in recovery. So just outing myself around that one thing gives people this sense that she's with me in this. She's
Mhm.
not over me. She's not trying to be superior to me. And yet she's got a lot of information and expertise that I need.
Beautiful.
So that's really how I roll.
Beautiful. That's so beautiful. And it's bringing up a lot, like, you're setting yourself up for a lot of shit flinging from people that aren't soothed and comforted and in need of that compassionate space holding. I know that my own sense of compassion, I did child welfare for 11 years and realized these children that I'm interviewing are likely to grow up and do the same things to their children that are being done to them. And
Yeah.
so I've found myself in places of really having compassion for everyone, because that's how we heal in the unified consciousness. You
Yes.
can't have just a perpetrator, if you want to get out of your victim story, you have to release the perpetrator. And so I've held space and for people and gotten shit myself, and I don't even think it's nearly as edgy as what you're doing. And I'm curious if you've experienced that. It's like Jesus, who not necessarily a sexologist, but he was holding space for all of the
Yeah.
people who were kind of just treated and seen as the dredge of society, and but holding space and holding the light, and that just takes incredible strength. And I'm just curious about your journey with that.
Well, first of all, thanks for asking about that. I feel seen by you. I really do. And that feels good. Yeah, it can be difficult. I mean, sometimes, as recently as yesterday, even, clients project a lot onto me that is antagonistic and hostile. I feel a couple of things. One, I've been them. I've
Mm,
done all that. I've been in my therapist's office telling them that I don't trust them and trying to, play games with them. And there's so much psychology that goes on between a coach and their client, or a therapist and their client. It helps to have some background in that, some education in that, but it also really helps to have been on both sides of it,
yeah.
so that I can empathize and go, well, I've actually done that. I know what I was feeling in my body when I was doing that. And they're not me. I'm not going to just project all my stuff onto them, but I am going to use it as kind of a template to find some footing here so that I don't become reactive.
Yeah.
And as an anger management coach, I can't afford to react. After all, my whole reputation is, so sometimes my ego gets in there. It's like, I'm not going to go there with them. But mostly what I'm doing is not going into ego, but practicing what I'm learning, still learning. Even though I'm trained, I'm still learning. I just took a weekend class again in IFS. It's a beautiful practice. I want to share a little bit about that
Yeah.
for your viewers, because it is so much about our sovereignty. And so the premise of IFS is that we have sub-personalities. And some of them are what we call protectors. They might be firefighters, they might be managers. Managers are really trying to keep you on track. And, they tend to be a little bit dry and logical. Firefighters are, they throw caution to the wind. They're just here to protect you. And they may do some very destructive things in order to try to protect you. And then we have exiles, which are our inner children. They've gotten stuck in points of trauma, and they're in a lot of pain. And that's who the firefighters are trying to protect. So self, what is self? Self in a lot of ways sounds a little bit godlike. I personally don't see it that way. Some people do see self as, oh, that's God. Some people see it as that's part of them. I see self as part of me. I experience it as part of me. And when I'm helping my clients to connect with self, I feel like I'm helping them connect to a part of them. I do believe in a higher consciousness, and I definitely value having a connection with that higher consciousness. But myself has sovereignty. It can only have sovereignty if my subpersonalities are working with me as partners. But here's what happens if I'm not conscious about this internal drama, then those subpersonalities take over, and they start to do things that might be bad for the people out here and bad for me. So a subpersonality would be the one who commits domestic violence. That one feels that you either hurt or be hurt. That one's coming from a place of tremendous fear, and oftentimes has, in my case, I saw there was just two examples. My mother's getting hurt, my father's doing the hurting. Which one do I want to do? Well, I don't want to get hurt, so I picked the other one. But I also have the side that gets hurt, and so I've flip-flop between those two. And when I work with domestic violence clients, I see they have the codependent part that's going to get hurt and submit to that abuse. And then they've got the perpetrator part. If we start to get to know those different parts, then we can find out how they're protecting us.
Yeah.
So we actually want to befriend them, ask them why they're doing what they're doing, what they're afraid of, how it is they're trying to help us. And we love them. We love those parts. And when we do, when we see them, we understand them, and we love them, they quiet down and they start to give us some space. And in that space, self is amazing. It's creative, it's compassionate, it's confident, it's calm, it's curious. And that's the place you want to come from, because that's the place that has true power.
Indeed. I love that. It's so aligned. Like I said, I when you mentioned, I know a few people who work with IFS, and so I did a little research. It is so aligned with the subconscious accessory patterning work that I do. That curiosity, the really bringing love, kindness, and compassion into these parts that would normally get labeled as bad, wrong, the fucked up part of me, the saboteur. That we end up, somebody abused that part of us, and then we end up becoming the perpetrators, thinking that it's damaged or the bad, the weak, shameful. And bringing that love and compassion and curiosity is so key. It's very, very aligned. I love that you bring that into your work. And how can people that are interested in bringing healing and bringing the sacred to their sexuality, bringing healing to these really tabooed, stigmatized experiences, because I know so many people have had them, in some way or been exposed. How can they connect with you and get on your train?
Absolutely. Thanks for asking about that too. And I just want one caveat. I've used labels here today: perpetrator, survivor, not everybody likes those labels. So the main thing is, are you in pain?
Mm.
And most of us are. This is a really trying time to be on planet Earth.
Oh.
And finding some clarity and a place inside that's calm And self-nurturing it's essential for every single one of us. So
Mhm.
you don't have to claim any of the labels that I've thrown out there today. I do that to destigmatize. Just
Mhm.
as I happily wore the word whore while I was a sex worker. I love
Scarlet letter.
I'm all about destigmatizing things.
Beautiful.
But that's my political axe to grind. That's the path
Mhm.
I'm on, and you find what's comfortable for you. But if you go over to my website, you're going to find my blog. You're going to find a library of podcasts that you can join for like $47 for lifetime. I've got an online training that you can enroll in, which also gives you access to email coaching from me, and you can always upgrade to one-on-one coaching via in person or video.
Beautiful.
And you can just reach out to me and schedule a first session
Awesome.
so we can get acquainted. We can talk for 10 minutes over the phone, but I really just prefer let's do that first session and see if
Yeah.
that. I
Yeah.
want you to know about my free gift.
Well, what is your website?
Oh, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different URLs driving to this one site. So you can do veronicamonet.com. You can do the exclusivepartnershipformula.com. The one I use is theshamefreezone.com.
Theshamefreezone.com. I love it. And
This
then what's your gift?
It's called the exclusive partnership formula. Look, I just talked about IFS and how we have all these subpersonalities. The whole goal of IFS is to achieve a partnership with your subpersonalities. We also want partnership in our personal relationships.
Uh-huh.
So this is what I'm all about, is this integration and this expression of we are here on behalf of each other. So the exclusive partnership formula has got some very concrete tools. I've got 5 steps to asserting a very powerful no that will draw your partner closer to you. We've also got how to take the perfect time out. That's going to create more harmony in your home. And a cute little game that my partner and I invented. It's called Show Me Your Movie. And it's all about building empathy for each other.
I love it. It sounds amazing and so helpful. And remind people how to get it, the shame-free zone?
The
No, no,
Shamefree,
it
theshamefreezone.com. It'll pop
okay.
up right there on the
Oh,
page and ask
beautiful.
if you want to download it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Veronica. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your compassion, your vulnerability, your transparency. All of it is so valuable and necessary. And I know you're doing great work in the world. And for all of you tuning in, sending you the love, the compassion for whatever shame, whatever pain you've got. We're here to serve your inalienable sovereignty. You can tune in same time, same place. And until we get to connect again, you, Veronica, and you out in Cyberland, may the source be with you.
Mm.